Can we start now? Should we start now?
Yeah,
We should.
good.
So too. All right. So we need a minute taker. Any volunteers? Take minutes.
You did it last time, didn't you?
No, I did it last time, so I don't
When
feel
you
guilty
said his
asking
name.
somebody else doing it.
Take minutes.
Just note what we talked about or what we did.
All right.
If there's
let's
any,
do it.
I
I'm gonna
guess
do it.
the big thing is there's a couple, you've got an agenda. There is a couple motions that need to be recorded. But sure. As far as discussion is concerned, it's your prerogative, what you feel is normally.
The biggest thing, most important thing for the minute taker is capturing the motions. Who made the motion, specifically what the motion was and how the voting went. Everything else is as you see fit. I was just checking to see if I had an extra hard copy of the agenda, but I do not.
They have to get transpired into the hard, into this. Yeah, so that is public, yeah. Got it.
And you may have an editable copy of the agenda and you can type right into that. If not, you can send an email to Jennifer and she can send you one. And
Well,
you can,
she's pretty good about just sending it to you.
yeah, see, that's why I think you might already have it.
Yeah. He just needs to know who to send it to.
Yeah.
Timekeeper. Oh,
I'll be the timekeeper.
okay.
You have to be out by 5 or
Seven.
7.
There's 5 to 7. So public comment, we don't have any public, so that's okay. The next item is to approve the agenda, review any additions, removals. I would like to note that the times are not correct. And rather than distribute time to the tasks, I think we should probably attempt to split our time between continuing business and a new business, perhaps, depending on the discussions. With a few minutes at the end for probably no public comment, but a meeting evaluation. So with that in mind, we'll adjust the times. Is there any other changes to the agenda?
I can't call it up right now. I know why I'm not finding it. Got the June 13th. Well, there's a 9/12. Agenda 9/12. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one, I think.
Yeah.
No,
9.
Approved minutes of June 13th is the last one I had.
there's an email on from
It says agenda
September 7th.
9/12.
Oh, you're in the committee engagement.
Oh, sorry. Damn. You didn't get a hard
It was on
copy, Kevin. I'll
September
get that
7th.
Okay.
There
Here
you
we go.
go.
I got it. There. Sorry, thank you. I let it go this morning. Unable to open item. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just trying to share it with you, Kathy. See if that helps.
Okay, you can. Yeah.
That is there the. Oh, that, yeah, it is. There's
Yeah,
the
my
wireless
phone.
password right there.
Can I share their phones?
Okay,
So in the meantime, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
so moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
On.
Okay. Passes. What's the next thing on the agenda? So the next thing is to approve the August 8th minutes, which were linked on the front. Anybody and everybody, the minute approval is informal, but you tend to approve minutes. For whatever reason, depending on what group you're in, there's a discussion every time as to whether it needs to be approved or not. But anyway, so I entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
And seconded.
Any discussion?
The minutes.
Okay, favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Abstaining, I wasn't here. So 2 in favor and 1 abstention.
Yeah, so I will vote to approve the minutes because I'm biased and I think they're great.
Did you write them? Yeah.
Since it was, I don't know, actually, it was no tie, it was 1-0.
We probably still need a quorum to make it official, right? So
Yeah, that's true. Get in?
Yeah.
I think the next thing is continuing business, which is to formulate a report out to the business meeting on September 26th for the central office location recommendation. Yeah, last time we had a presentation and think we could go ahead and confirm to readdress or discuss about that.
I think that there were a couple of kind of lingering items we learned in that meeting about the process. So I think we reached a consensus, and you weren't there, Kathy, so we can revisit the conversation. But the consensus was that purchasing the building we're in now makes the most sense programmatically, economically, et cetera. Though it may pose a challenge politically in terms of the perception of the community and acquiring additional space. So that's a super brief summary, I think, of kind of where we landed. One of the lingering questions was who has what authority in making that purchase and what does that process look like? In the meeting, I was communicating with our legal counsel, and she confirmed that it does require, even though we don't need a bond or anything like that, it does by statute require a vote of the electorate to authorize the board to acquire property. And I've since gotten further clarification about the mechanism through which we get voter approval. Could it be a floor vote, or does it have to be Australian ballot? And I suspected it had to be Australian ballot, and that was confirmed.
Yeah.
So that complicates things. There's an expense and a timeline and a process that surrounds that. That's more cumbersome and gets more voter turnout than a floor vote would at a special meeting. But that's what we'll need to do. So we'll have to think about when that would happen. And that isn't something this committee has to decide, but we may want to think about a recommendation to the board. Typically, when we have an Australian ballot, we piggyback on some other election that's happening. That's out of respect to town clerks who have to organize these things.
Yep.
And it's to help minimize the cost, because it's probably, it's ballpark $1,000 a town to conduct an Australian ballot election. Which isn't necessarily cost prohibitive, but it's an added cost. And especially when it's an off cycle, it adds quite a burden to town officials.
And the turnout is low.
And the turnout typically is low.
You're not
Yeah.
getting a representation of the population.
Yep. And so what I'm not sure of is there an election in November?
No.
There's no state, there's not the presidential election is not happening, but there's not a state election either, right? It's off cycle, so.
So
that means
it'll be town
March.
meeting.
It's the next
So-
opportunity.
I think before we jump that far, Patrick, I reviewed your slide presentation. I have a lot of questions about it. First, is it okay if I just go ahead?
Yep.
Okay, this is question. So what, and forgive me for not being there, but what has driven this move all of a sudden?
Our lease is up.
Okay, so lease is up and they wouldn't extend it for a year.
It has been extended.
And when
Yeah, we're at
they wouldn't extend it for another year.
No, and they frankly, they have buyers that if we're not interested, they have other people they're gonna go to and they're interested in liquidating, so.
So would part of their sale also be a part of the benefit of selling with a full house, if you will, on a property? Was it if you stay on and whoever buys it might want to buy it with us there?
Maybe, and maybe not. It would be a gamble. Some of the folks that we think might be interested are not interested in it as a rental. They're interested in occupying it.
The
So,
entire space or just the space that you're in, right?
the entire space. Obviously, they would have to
That's
honor
good.
whatever, right,
The
yeah.
economy.
Yeah.
I guess, so my other concern is, have we done a feasibility study? I kept seeing reference to childcare. Have we done a feasibility studies of how many 2, 3, 4-year-olds there are in this district?
We have those numbers. I mean, but in terms of a feasibility study for
Why, I guess I don't understand why childcare has come up into play.
that's been a topic of conversation for a long time. There's a perceived need in childcare. The reality is, I think the need is greatest in the infant and toddler, less so in the 3 and 4-year-olds. However, the 3 and 4-year-olds are kind of where our private providers make their bread and butter because the ratios of the number of kids they have to adults is different. And so we've explored, and childcare has come up as a conversation at this board level before in terms of what opportunities might this board take advantage of in increasing that childcare that we provide.
So tell me, in your mind, what does childcare look like?
So separate from early education, childcare really is a sort of safe and, space that's conducive to continued learning, but it's not really necessarily governed under the same regulations that an early education center would be. And we actually currently do both. So we have an early ed program, so that does the 10 hours a week and things of that nature. And in addition to that, our ELP program, the sort of saplings is sort of the sub set of our ELP program that offers childcare to supplement those 10 hours to create kind of a whole experience for families. So we're doing that now.
So you're still talking school day, school year.
Correct.
School week.
Yep.
And the school calendar.
We do offer ELP obviously offers after school and summer programming and vacation programming. I'd have to check to see if that includes like 3 and 4-year-olds as well. Pretty sure it doesn't include infants and toddlers, but I think it may also provide service to 3 and 4-year-olds during those times.
So I think that where I'm leaning is I look at, number one, if we were to buy that building, that would take that building off of the tax rolls for the town of Bristol, which you're absolutely right, would be, politically disadvantageous to us.
Yeah.
This is the word I'm after. And we have, we came close a year ago to closing schools because we have so much room. So how can we justify to the public, taxpayers, that we have this extra room in our schools, but we need to buy another building for which then we would be landlords. We'd be in a whole different bailiwick as a landlord with different liabilities and greater costs.
At least for a period of time. I don't know that the intent would be to continue to be landlords, but at least it would to start because there are some leases.
What would you look to do with it?
I think that's the question, right? So we've talked about expanding programming, and childcare is an example of expanding programming we've discussed. There's talk about, especially with our partner programs, closing. So Center Point Close, that's a program that has served students with some pretty intensive needs. That may be a trend. I suspect it is, sadly. And the responsibility for school districts to create their own programming to support some more intensive needs, I think is likely in our future. Having space to do that becomes important.
And how much space do you project that we would need?
Hard to know. We'd have to really think about, we would probably build programs that have a cap based on the space and the staffing that we could find. So
I think that's the key.
Staffing is pretty huge. And if you can find staffing and you don't have the space, well, then you're in a different pickle. So that's
that would be glorious, though.
Yeah, right. I would take
glorious.
that. But in terms of, and this was really the essence of our entire conversation last time we met, was around why does it make the most sense? For me, as we talk about programming, if we take over, so if we use the 3rd floor at Beeman, for example, that's something we look really seriously at. We've had architectural drawings and things like that done, cost estimates. We could spend more money than purchasing the building we're in to renovate that one floor. We estimated around 1.5 million. In the event that, and that would suit us well, like that wouldn't be a problem, we'd use the existing space. In the event we decided at some point, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, actually, we want to return that space to serving students, we don't get any of that 1.5 back. We actually have to put more money into that space to return it to a space that's suitable to serve students.
But what's the
So it
real
becomes a
likelihood
sunk
of that?
cost.
You know, we don't have projections 5 and 10 years down the road. And what's the likelihood that that's going to happen?
We actually do have projections, at least 5 years down
That
the
say
road
you're
for
going to need
enrollment.
that space at FEMA?
No,
Okay, so,
yeah, I mean, that's part of the challenge, is it's possible that that would be forever. And frankly, if we put 1.5 million into it,
Mhm.
there's gonna be a lot of pressure to make that forever, even if there was something that would be advantageous to students. The benefit to purchasing the space we're in now, it costs less. The transition time is,
well, I don't think that it costs less, Patrick. I think that if you look, maybe the purchase price might be a little bit less than what you might spend on revamping the buildings, but it didn't look like the difference was that great.
no, probably a few $100,000.
Yeah. And I think that you're also, like, I think you also noted that right out of the gate, you're looking at, somebody's got to redo the parking lot. You know, there's always maintenance to a building that you own.
Mhm.
And a building that you own with other tenants in it, even for a few years, is still an expense. And it's a liability to this district. Correct?
Not anymore. I mean, so we would have insurance that would carry that. We have insurance that covers us for lots of other things. So we're not seeing it as a liability. In fact, from a cash flow perspective, we would have the income from the rentals that would offset the costs, at least for whatever period of time it would be.
But it wouldn't offset the costs of the investment, the original investment. You never get that payback. You would
Only if you sold the building.
only if you sold the building.
Right.
But what I'm hearing is that you're not intending to sell that building.
Perhaps not. I mean, that's the hard part, is there's still a lot in flux. I think we're gonna continue to feel pressures financially and programmatically. How we respond to those pressures is hard to predict. And I know it's better to have more options than fewer options when faced with that.
And we've got Starksboro, we have space in Starksboro, we have space in New Haven. Does Bristol have any space at all?
I mean, it depends on how you define space, right? So Bristol has 240 something, 250 students in it. At one point it had 500 students.
Right.
So I think a case could be made that there's space. Are there currently empty rooms that have nothing in them? No.
They never is. Are you kidding?
Exactly.
It's like a kitchen table, it never stays clear.
Yeah.
You know, it always fills with something.
So there is space being utilized. We would relocate whoever has offices there, or whatever the case may be, to make the space that we're talking about.
So it is conceivable that even with these grand plans, which would be wonderful, that we would have space in the district to accommodate additional programs without having to buy a building.
Yes, and where they're located would be somewhat driven by the space that's available.
Right. But there is room, there's current room. I have to tell you, I find it really hard. I love the forward thinking. I absolutely do. I love being able to project or dream big. I also know that people are taxed to the limit. And, you know, we can't float a bond to repair Mount Aid. You know, to do what you wanted to do at Mount Aid, we could never float it. And the taxpayers are saying enough. And that's what I'm hearing. And if we can make do with the space that's available to us, I think that we should do it. We owe that to the taxpayers to do that. And when we have a concrete plan, and if you have a concrete plan, you know, I don't know how many 3-year-olds you're planning to bring on. It seems as though you're more than adequately able to handle the 3-year-old population you've got now. And again, there's always going to be a need for private early childhood programs. And I would not want to jeopardize that industry, which is what we do when we increase the number of students we bring into a public school. You also have, I mean, you have a hard time staffing. People in early childhood have an even harder time staffing because they can come to the public school and do what they want for a fraction of the day. It doesn't meet the needs of the families that have to work. And people come here they will come to a public school to work rather than work in the private industry. So we have to weigh that. I was glad that you said that to begin with. We have to weigh that very, very carefully. And, you know, we don't know what the need is for 3-year-olds. And I don't see that. I know that the study committee, there's Act 76 that was passed this year. And originally in the legislation, Act 76 incorporated requiring 3-year-olds, all schools to offer a 3-year-old program. And that was taken out of legislation in order to move it from house to house in the legislature. And it only got put back in as a last minute as a study committee. There is no directive, there is no mandate for you to do it, for us to do it.
So this is starting to become a specific attribute of use of available space. So I think the points made and accepted and understood that there's a variety of open spaces that a variety of programs may or may not take. And it will still result in excess space. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, whether it's preschool, pre-K, whatever, or something afterwards, after school programs or specialized programs. So I don't think there's, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's an argument that that's the program that's going to be the program, and if that program was in there, it complicates things. It's just like there's this big bulk of what ifs, if you will. And at the end of the day, there's still space available.
And the taxpayers know that, you know, we've talked about closing schools. And there was huge pushback against that. I mean, we all heard it.
Yeah. So, Justin, you have any further thoughts based on what Kathy said?
With the building, we're only talking about buying the building that you're in, right? And there's
Right.
how many other businesses?
So right now, 2. So the Bristol Police Department and then Stony
Stony
Hill
Hill.
Properties, yeah.
Yeah,
So
Stony
Kevin
Hill.
has an office space up above, and then they're
Yeah.
using a back storage area for like a warehouse.
Property wise, how much property goes with that? Do you know?
Not much, it's essentially the sort of the footprint of the building,
And the
and
parking.
then it's shared, so like the parking, there's a shared. Sort of expense for the parking area, I believe.
So you
Or
really
would have a
only
little
own
more
the
of that
building.
detail. But like, so the cost to maintain that parking area, because it's not used just for the folks that are in the building we're in, it's also used for the one that's sort of kitty corner from our
Yeah.
office, and actually even recently, they've been sort of the overflow for the parking over by Mountain Hill.
Mountain Hill.
Mhm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
cut you
no,
off. I was
no,
just-
no,
I was
I'm
just wondering how
trying-
much acreage went.
No, so I'm trying to still absorb all this.
Yeah,
I know, you know, to your point, Kathy, like thinking about what the future holds. I mean, when I moved to Moncton, that's when I think you had the idea of combining Addison Northwest. I think that was part of your presentation too, was like, well, what happens in 5 years if we combine and then we have a central office in Virgins? And so what do you do with that space? Yeah, a lot to think about.
yeah.
So Addison Northwest wasn't interested in teaming? I don't even know where their office is in Virgins.
When you say teaming, like sharing. central
Right,
office
sharing an
space.
office space.
No, the conversation really never happened. I think the
Mm.
proximity, right? So having a central office that isn't even in the
In the
district
district, yeah.
is, I think, complicates things.
Yeah.
Certainly from a customer service perspective, people have to pop in for something, it's a little different situation.
And as I think through, Bristol is really not only centrally located, it is where significant 3/4
Pretty
of
close
the
to that.
population, student population is centered in Bristol. So,
And employees.
yeah, and so if you go to Virgins or New Haven or Starksboro, you're going to the extents of the district. And all of a sudden, that core is more difficult to serve.
But how so,
Yeah.
Kevin? How would it be more difficult?
Well, if you got feet on the ground, they gotta get in the car and go from New Haven to Bristol or Starksboro
But the Starksboro and New Haven teachers have to do that anyway, or Starksboro and New Haven staff have to do that.
to come to Bristol.
Uh-huh.
So, but that's half the distance of going from Haven to.
And how
Starksboro.
often do you? I think we're just getting, I don't wanna get too far.
So,
But I'm just
yeah,
thinking
I-
that, you know, I think that there are pros and cons to which end you locate on, but the fact remains that you're right, there's space available that we already own, that we already have paid for, and the taxpayers can certainly,
But to
Understand.
Patrick's, yeah, so but I. More central location you have. For that support function, that supports 4 different campuses. 2 of them in Bristol. I foresee having an office in Starksboro and Hayden again as being a disadvantage to the flow, if you will, of the central office functions across the other schools in the district.
We talked a little bit too before, and really at the end, I agree with everything that's been said, and the future isn't certain. I mean, we have enrollment projections and they've been fairly accurate. I think we have some documents to look at later related to that. But in the end, the future is hard to predict, even though we try. And reducing space that could otherwise be available for programming could have an impact on the future. We don't know. And the risk of sunk cost is very real if we did make that change. And to me, that's greater than the risk of whatever liability comes that our insurance will protect us against with having renters for a period of time, and the potential of, if we change our mind in 10 years around the central office space, we're going to recoup some, maybe even make a profit on the sale of the space that we're in now. There's no way we make a profit on or even recoup the cost of renovating one of our spaces in our buildings. We did talk a little bit too, less of a factor, but something to be thinking about. When central office is in a school building, there are plenty of pros with that. I love the proximity to students and the teaching and learning. The drawback is when that school is in a crisis, we're no longer in the same position to assist that school because we're in the crisis with them instead of outside of the crisis supporting that. Luckily, those don't happen very often where schools go in lockdown, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility.
Well, the protocol could also happen in any central office. If you look at what might be the case of the classroom in crisis, the central office could be in crisis as well.
Well, and that's part of
none of us are.
No, and that's part of the other flip side to that is we, as a central office, we draw different foot traffic to that school that would otherwise go to that school if central office is there. And so we want to be really careful. It's part of the cost of the upfit is ensuring that central office can be distinctly different with locked doors between central office space and the school space so that we're controlling that access. And actually the new legislation that's passed around safety requires that. So that visitor access is a lot tighter under the new legislation than it has been. Right.
In all schools, that's not going to change.
Yeah. So for all those reasons, it really, as Floyd and I talked about this over the last several months, the political reality is very real. But from a sort of business perspective and potential future programming perspective, we have more options available if we stayed in the building that way.
And going to the taxpayers and asking them for another $1 million.
We don't need to ask them for anything. It's already in the budget.
But you gotta ask them for
You have to-
permission.
We need their
Permission to
permission to
use
purchase the
that
building,
money.
but we don't need,
Yeah.
we don't need to ask them. We're not borrowing any more money. We have it in the budget to purchase the
But
building.
we also have that $1 million in the budget to maintain the buildings that we've already got.
Yep.
That are already in disrepair according to your reports over the years.
Yep, and that would be the
So-
difference for that $1 million, instead of purchasing the building, we would otherwise have been putting that money into the facilities, yeah.
Right, so,
Well, you would put that money into retrofitting another space for a fit up. So irregardless of what
Right.
you do, you spend X to buy the building, and you'd spend X plus a little bit to retrofit a space for whatever budget year that's gonna fall into.
well, and there's buying the building and maintaining another facility. You know, we can't maintain
we're
the facilities we've got.
We're in a sense maintaining the building now because we're paying CAM charges.
Well,
It's a
we
triple.
shouldn't be, yeah, but we should not be paying all that much. We're not paying what we would be paying if we owned that building.
If we, and in some ways, we need to sort of, so it appears to us that staying in that building isn't an option unless we buy it. That may or may not be true, depending on who actually pulls the trigger and buys it. Our belief is the people that are courting Kevin right now are not the people that are looking to rent to the school district. They want to own that piece to put their own offices and do their own thing there. So that would either, so if purchasing the building's off the table, the only options are find another place to lease. In which case it's going to be some sort of an upfit, like we're paying for it anyway. over the course of the lease. That's how it is in the space we're in now. Like, we paid Stony Hill Properties or whoever it is that actually owns it, Kevin Harbert,
Bristol work.
to upfit that space for our purposes. We did it over 10 years. And they're in gravy time right now. That's all paid for, it's done and gone, and we're still paying more rent than we were when those expenses were not paid off yet. So regardless of where we go, if we move into that new red building out behind the fire station, we're going to be paying our share of the space that we're taking up, and whatever upfit costs it will take to make that space suitable for our needs.
So what I'm hearing is you're committed to keeping the central office in Bristol.
No, that would be true wherever we go. Wherever we go, we're gonna pay for upfit costs. There's not, and we actually reached out to Kevin as a relative expert in terms of space availability. He said there isn't any to begin with. And if there was any, we're paying for the retrofit to make the space ours,
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
whether it's at Beaman or wherever that is.
Do you think the town would be, or the taxpayers would be upset if just right on the lot here, you were to put up an office? I think that was one of your options, was to like tag on to the school here, or.
So we have that little,
Right.
the gray house in
Gray
the
house.
corner there.
That's
Right.
where the superintendent's office always used to be.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, the Great House is always.
And we had architects look at that option as well. And
So
that-
expanding it and renovating it. Knowing that Mount Abe will always be here, hopefully. And having the same security concerns, that wasn't one of the top consideration.
honestly, whether it's Starksboro or Beaman or renovating the gray house or we looked at putting a space over it's called the middle school wing. It's not just the middle school, but this new wing here at Mount Abe that doesn't have a second floor. I guess it's this way. We looked at putting a second floor on that. All of those renovation projects were in the same ballpark of expense. And we haven't gone back to cost estimators to do all that work and spend that money doing it. We've just used I think maybe a 7% escalator from whenever we actually got a number to today's date as a way to get us in the ballpark of what we'd be looking at for expenses. They're all in the $1.5 to $2 million range. Using that sort of calculation.
The only difference I see if that was to get renovated, it seems like the second floor of Beaman. Like, you're not gonna have to re-renovate that space if you were to stay there, for a while, but in 5 years. Maybe you're moving out of Beaman.
Right.
Because there's an uptick of young kids moving in here with kids,
In the meantime, there is actually a program in that building right now that would be displaced, which is certainly workable. But it would displace that program.
And where were they before they came to Beaman?
So they're not, so the program that's in the gray house right now is a middle high school program. So
I thought you said at Beaman, that somebody would be displaced at Beaman.
right, so the folks that would be displaced at Beaman they're basically offices, and then there's an art room and special education services room and the music room. I think those are all, so offices and those art, music, and special education services are that third floor beam. So the art, music would be, and special education services, we'd need to find someplace else on the lower level or that middle level of Beaman for those to be located. And then the office space, we'd tuck them somewhere in one of the things.
And is there room to do that?
Yeah, there's room. They probably would have to share a space, which they're both very part-time anyway, so it's
Art and music
feasible.
was always the same.
Right, yeah.
So.
So yeah, I think, square footage wise in rooms, yes. And for example, one of the rooms right now where we have sort of programming set up for when a student becomes dysregulated, they can go into that space and kind of have a separate space from everyone else to become regulated. That would be one of the spaces that we would lose probably in moving the art and music room into that space.
So do we have, not you, I'm not going to attack you. Do we have these spaces in every elementary school and the high school and the junior high school?
For dysregulated students? Yeah, and they vary in size and shape and number. Like Bristol may have a couple of places, but they're smaller than this one room at Beaman. Yes.
So it's not like we'd be moving into a different building, so we'd just be moving within Beaman.
Right.
So it's 6:37. I'm not sure, I'm hearing the consensus, a lot of discussion as to what we want to pitch.
Yeah, what is the goal of the outcome of this discussion? Instead, come together on
So-
agreement so then we can tell everybody else kind of what we're
What
thinking.
we're thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the board will look to this group for some advice on action to take, and it's important that we take whatever action we're going to take soon, because either we need a long lead time for a construction project, or we need to make a commitment to purchasing the building, so, because Kevin's sort of at a point where he's saying, you can make up your mind.
Yeah. That's why I
Because if
said-
you don't want it, somebody else wants it, and if you don't make up your mind, I might be in a position where I have to make your mind up for you, because he's not gonna lose a potential sale while we continue to ponder.
It's too bad that it's not a philanthropic move.
I think he's ready to slow down a little bit with his
Oh, with
philanthropic
philanthropy.
endeavors.
Well, he's a very generous person, very kind.
Yeah.
To his community.
Yeah.
Um,
And he's been very patient with us. He gave us a 2-year extension with a 1-year kicker. And we're at a point now, part of the reason we need to make this decision is because if we are gonna do a construction project, we're gonna use all of that time we have left to do the planning and make that all happen and get that done so we can move out in time for the lease to end. And again, the flip side is, if we aren't doing that, but we're gonna buy it, he needs to know that sooner rather than later, so he can plan accordingly.
We can't actually commit to buying it until probably next
March.
March.
But at least to go to him and say, the board has decided they want to purchase this, and here's the process we have to go through, I think he will work with us. I don't have any concern.
Has anyone talked to folks at Beaman at Starksville? Potentially getting a central office there.
I talked with the principal of Beaman. We haven't really entertained Starksboro, because in my thinking, part of what we looked at Beaman was, Beaman's a whole lot closer than Robinson is
It
to
is.
that center of the district, so it's a lot less convenient to travel to Starksboro if you're the 70% of whatever people that are in Bristol than it is to scoot out to New Haven. But also in the event that at some point down the road there was a merger, Beaman's probably the most centralized location of that
Any of
new
them.
merged district than any other building in any of the districts. So that was sort of it could work for us in the immediate, and a little forward thinking made that probably the wisest place for a combined central office. So that's why Beaman, and that's why Starksboro has been entered into the conversation about a possible location for central office.
I guess I would just wanna. I would want to take the pulse of folks in New Haven. You know, they're very guarded about that school. But we also have a lot of empty space up there. And they didn't like the idea of closing it. So if we're not going to close it and we're not going to fill it, this is the best option.
Over the last few years, I found every town is pretty guarded about
They
this.
are. You know,
I don't think I could tell you one is more than the other.
and
If
that's-
anything, we got a warmer reception to the idea of repurposing Beaman than we did any others.
Good to know.
That's based on the 7 people that showed up to the engagement thing we did, right? But so it's limited, but
Okay, so
Well, if we were to do like a survey, you know how you do that without letting the cat out of the bag.
so the task before us is to report out something at the next business meeting.
and I would say more than report out, make a recommendation to the board. I think that would be the most advantageous thing to say, here's what we think ought to happen.
After central office out.
I guess it depends on what you consider a central office position. There are different lenses on that. When I think about the actual people that are
Physically in the office.
physically in there right now, knowing that some of them are in and out. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11. I would say 11 consistently, and we have a number of folks that sort of have a landing area, so.
Squat spot is what the
Exact
state
squat
used to call
spot,
it, yeah.
yes. So we have a number of folks that kind of come in, so like our mentor coordinator isn't there Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30, but pops in over the course, our ELP coordinator, so. Mick Baker, our pre-K coordinator, so we have a lot of folks that are in either work part-time, or for other reasons are only in and out.
So basically.
So how many workstations do you need?
Honestly, we probably, with conference rooms, so we have sort of our main conference room, we have the little one in the back. And when 2 or 3 of those people are in at once,
Yeah.
they will usually sort of take on some of those spaces. And if the conference room is busy, then usually somebody's office has some space, so we kind of land wherever they need to land.
So there's no desk hoteling per se.
No, they're pretty portable. They pretty much bring their laptop and whatever things they need in their bag, and they can kind of land anywhere. We have a desk that's in, so one of the big rooms in central office has kind of a 3/4 dividing wall down the center, and there's 2 desks on one side and 2 desks on the other. And one of those sides, the desk is sort of this floater desk.
And so we're gonna meet beginning of October, right?
September 26th.
But not the facilities, right? Isn't the facilities once a month?
Right, so
So, is that when we're going to propose to the board what our suggestion is? Cause it doesn't seem like at 6:45, where the 3 of us are in agreement. So does that mean like we're gonna meet at the beginning of October facilities and then go out there at
the plan
7,
was in
or is
September.
today?
The plan was
Yeah.
for the
Gotcha.
board to make a decision again, because we could easily be another month or 2 months or 5 months
Yeah.
or 6 months. We've been talking about this for 2 years now. We've been kind of waiting to see what's happening with the merger and all this other stuff, because that may drive what makes sense.
Yeah.
That's now all behind us. And we need to really move
Yeah.
past the discussion at some point here.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that you make some really awesome points, what do we do about the space that we have in all the schools, and you don't have a lot of students coming in right now, so there's empty rooms, but being new to the district, it seems like there's a lot of buildings that need upkeep. So my direction would be just to buy the main office,
And upkeep the main office.
upkeep the main office, yeah, exactly, yeah, and then actually renovate the school for school stuff, like whatever we need for classrooms.
But you're using $1 million to do it.
You're gonna use $1
Very
million
true.
either way.
What's that?
That's
You're
true.
gonna use.
But at least $1 million
$1
would be in the building that's already, you're not buying another whole building to maintain.
And I would like to hope that maybe in 5 years, we see an uptick. I mean, Moncton just had a second kindergarten teacher come in this year. And then maybe you have students filling the space, and if not, I mean, maybe there's an opportunity to sell.
I could find people that will talk about climate migration and this great big move. We've never experienced it, but
And then,
Let's
like,
talk about
in the organization that I work in at the landscaping company, if we don't have a well-rounded support staff, you can't support the people in the school. So like, as I'm thinking about that, if you guys have a good operating system, you're already established, it's gonna be less disruption that you can help teachers. Why not change any of that?
So
That's my stance.
I don't believe you'll ever see the schools filled. They were around 1,000, which my daughter was part of the bell curve.
well, and so some of this is related,
So-
and again, it's another unpredictable thing.
Yeah.
So if we talk PCBs for a minute, I'm not super concerned about PCBs. I think what little bit of testing we've done indicates that I'm not anticipating some
That's what
catastrophic
Burlington
things.
is dealing with,
Right, that's what
right?
Burlington
That's
is doing
okay,
with that.
yeah.
Well,
Why they're building
Burlington's
this
not
right now.
alone.
Yeah.
Burlington as a whole, yeah.
And then the whole PCB thing, the regional board meeting last week or the week before was pretty much exclusively about PCBs.
PCB.
And some funky things happening there. So the legislature has promised funds to cover the cost for PCB remediation. So if they're paying for the testing, and if you've got to do something significant to remediate, then they're promising the funds to do it.
My understanding was that they were holding that. They put a hold on the testing because there is not enough money to cover remediation. They'd have no idea where money is coming from. Look at the Burlington bill. Where's that money gonna come from? The ed department doesn't have, the ed budget.
Well, they're
doesn't
giving
have
them
it.
17 million.
So, yeah. Much,
They're counting
much
on it.
most of a lot of other school
But
districts.
my point being, one of the things that's coming with that is there's potential that as the state's looking at, they may say, we will cover the remediation, but here's how we're gonna do it. And that might be, we'll build you a school in this location and you're gonna close those two. So that, who knows where that's gonna go?
I think that's a huge pedal that nobody wants to stir.
I completely agree. And at some point, it probably will have to get stirred.
So, where I'm at is, I think it should be centrally located in Bristol. And I understand the benefits of buying the building. I wouldn't be opposed to look Gray House either, but I think as far as, my opinion is to make a recommendation 2 weeks is to buy the building. It's a question of whether the logic of a lesser cost to buy that building versus fitting up something else flies with the taxpayers. I mean, that's ultimately the answer is town meeting day, if that's when we choose to proceed with this, whether it's a yes or no.
Yep.
I'd like to see the numbers on adding on here. If you say it's gonna be roughly the same cost to add that square footage here.
No, it'll be more. So this was, if I'm remembering, I didn't bring the figures with me. The highest cost for the renovation was putting the second story on this wing here at Mount A, because when that was constructed, the roof structure was not built to have a second story on it. So that whole
Reinforced.
yeah, had to be reinforced. So you have to basically sort of tear that apart and then build from sort of the ground up, if you will, that headspace. And then you need access to that, which second elevator's been in the talks anyway. Because you want to control access to that space. You wouldn't want to send people through the school to get upstairs to central office. To create a separate entrance that gets you to that second story. And it would have to be accessible as well. So that started to compound the cost for the second story over here.
Like 600,000 more. 1.8, right? Well, this your
Right, that was just sort of
PowerPoint.
taking the numbers we got initially, which were only estimates at the time, and
Yeah.
using 7%.
It's a lot.
Again, is 7% accurate or not? Who knows?
Yeah.
Probably on the low side, I would say.
Yeah.
Certainly the last couple of years has been more than 7%.
So what's your pleasure? We need to. We have 10 minutes, so.
Stated.
Do a thumbs up or make a motion.
It's hard. No.
I don't know,
For-
if you have to
Only
answer,
4 months in.
I don't know, if you have to answer to folks that don't understand and.
It's
I-
everybody.
Yeah, and well, yes and no.
Yeah.
But I also think that, we're gambling here saying, oh, there might be more programs. We can always add more programs. If you've got the space, you'll fill it, so.
I'm not hung up on the space thing. I understand that there's excess space. There'll be excess space, even if we take 3,000-4,000 square feet out of what we have for excess space. I think the question has to do more with where do we want to put our money? Well, put our money in a standalone building that has a resale value, or do we want to spend that money as a single cost? And maybe that's all we need to renovate a space within an existing school building.
Well, if all you're looking at is office space, I mean, that really is the most critical need right now, correct? We need office space. Like you're being booted out of your office.
Yeah, that's the
So
immediate.
that's
right?
the critical need. And the board hasn't done any long-term, or this committee hasn't done any long-term projections about what the other costs are gonna be and what might be the other programs. What the critical need is, and that's not going to go away, is you need 10 desk spots, basically.
Not really,
Well, in the support, I mean. I'll
Yeah.
let-
right?
And if we have that space already, why buy another building to do it? I mean, I can't justify it. I can't take it back to taxpayers and say, we're gonna spend another $1.5 million here on another building.
The way I look at it is. It's the same cost. Operational cost is negligible. And it's just keep going. And so,
Well, that was part of the view, right, was. I mean, personally, if I had the option to put $1.5 million into my house, that would be nicer, but maybe not necessarily really worth anymore. On a resale, or put $1.5 million into another property that 10 years down the road, if I want to download it, I probably get 1.7 million.
If it's well maintained.
Mhm.
Which is another cost.
well, it's just at Wrinkleton. Fab buildings.
Yeah,
Nothing to brag about.
right.
But you're not gonna increase that much.
Yeah.
But I think it's a safe bet that you at least get your money back.
So here, would this be a strategy that we have? I sense maybe 2 thumbs up and 1 thumb down. It's wishy-washy, but do we present to the board the pros and cons? I mean, we're not making a decision
2 weeks we are.
in 2 weeks. Well, we have
Won't be here.
I mean, it seems fair to me to say to the board, here's the dialogue that this committee had, here are the pros and cons as this committee saw it. It wasn't unanimous, and that's fine. And you can share the different perspectives, and I'm not 100% sure where your thumb is right now. I know where yours is, and I know where yours is, I think. Really clear. I'm not sure I know where yours is. But I think it's fair to say, you know, this is where we are. And it's whatever that simple majority means to the board, they take that, they can ask their questions, and nothing we just talked about is gonna change in the coming weeks or months.
So that's.
So we're not gonna have any new information to wait for.
Well, we have more of input from, say, New Haven or Starksboro. To see what the climate is there, what,
I guess I'm not sure where Starksboro keeps coming.
that was one of your proposals, you had.
Oh,
one
well,
of your
so
slides.
Steve Rooney was interested in considering Starksboro as one of the places.
So really our choice is Beaman or the building. that we're
Really,
in.
the choice could be pick a building. Like, to me, it doesn't matter so much which building. There are pros and cons in terms of proximity, but no matter what building we pick, it's gonna be $1.5 to $2 million to do the renovation. No matter what building we pick, we're gonna take over space that could otherwise in the future be used for programming for students. Like, so almost all of the conversation isn't different. Whether it's the wing over the middle school here, or it's the Gray House, or it's Beaman, or it's Moncton, or Trop, that doesn't much matter. That's all.
Well, it
kind
does,
of the
because
same
the cost is
conversation.
gonna be different, you've gotta do more with the Gray House than you have to do anywhere else.
The cost is gonna be incrementally different. They're all of those projects probably fit within that 1.5.
Of course, the other caveat to that is that Gray House project, I think, has some amenities that you wouldn't necessarily have to put in for a central office to support
Right.
fields or something.
We were talking
right?
about
So-
the potential, and I'm trying to remember if that was in the cost or if that had been parsed out. We'd look at it, but there's potential in that renovation to add some bathrooms that could be used for the events that happen on like the football lacrosse
So we-
fields and things.
If that, I guess we want to make sure that that cost, I think, was higher in your slideshow.
Reflects that
Right,
addition,
yeah.
which is beyond the
There's
scope
no
of what we're
program.
looking at. As a central, just as a straight central office. So what's in there now, Patrick? You said there was,
So we have some students with pretty significant handicaps that are getting their needs met. And
and they're not able to be met here?
some of them can spend some time here and others need a pretty separate location. And that changes over the course of the school year as, you know, needs improve. And
So what did we do before we used the Gray House?
some of these students were placed out of district. At times we had 2 trailers at one point behind the building here that house alternative programming like this.
So we have 4 minutes to finish up. do we want to,
Thumbs up,
well, we could do a thumbs up, but I sense are you this way?
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think my first recommendation would be to purchase the
Yeah.
office
So there's
building.
2 yeses and 1 no.
Mhm.
So. Should we make a formal motion then?
I don't think it was on the agenda as a formal motion,
Was
right?
it?
Did it stay as a discussion or was there an item after those?
Oh, when it says action, that means.
Or
You
so
can-
action
you're
means
right,
there's
discussion.
You need to take
Yeah,
an
you don't
action.
need,
And
don't
so,
need any action, so.
Well, if you take an action, we'll be done. When we know what it's going to be.
Ready? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm assuming if we have people that are gonna be remote, we'll need to. If nobody's gonna be remote, I don't think we need to because the whole thing is executive sessions.
but what we're gonna do next week would be to give the floor,
weeks.
like to explain pros and cons to the board, but
And
the recommendations are.
does this make sense? I'll script something up. And that we have a split decision that is a majority but a split. And try to lay out the pros and cons, and you guys can look at it and parse that up and use it as a,
You could, yeah, you can, that would be great if you would do that, but I think you can make the vote tonight and be done. So we'll know that, and you will know.
But
But our
we didn't warn that.
recommendation- You asked for an action, so an action can be
That's what I
a
was
motion.
curious.
no, it's a discussion.
It's
Well,
listed
it
as a
said
discussion.
Formulate. Formulate report out for business meeting, so.
Which I think is fine, I mean. I think what you described, and that's something we could even attach to the agenda. If that was ready to go in time, people could read it and kind of be thinking about it at a meeting.
Then we can just say, here's where we think we need to go, and here's some cons.
Well, this was the decision of the committee. 2 in favor, with 1 opposed.
So do we
Pros
need
and
to,
cons.
yeah, okay. Okay, I'll work on that and send it to both of you,
Thanks, Kevin, for doing that.
and then, each of you can reply. Keep this like not a business meeting, each reply directly
Right.
back with comments.
To you. Did Kevin give you a timeline instead when he wanted decision? But you're not-
No,
for next March, but that would be enough to hold
Right,
sort of the place right now.
yeah, I think if we explain the situation and he gets there. There's a process for everything and it's always a slow process when it's public schools.
Yeah.
Government at all.
So I think if he knew that the board wanted to purchase it, but needed. To get the authority from the electorate. And the next. Unless the board thinks otherwise, the next likely time that would happen would be town meeting day. And I could at least see if he could live with that. I mean, the town meeting day piece is. My sense is he could live with that, because I think he's got eager people that. Again, if he can say to them, I'll know in March if this is gonna happen or not.
Yeah.
They might be willing to kind of hold off until then for a few months.
And he's just sold off some of the property over there as well. So.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So the next item quickly going through is new business. I would recommend a motion, or I'd like a motion to table that.
Is there any new business?
Yes, well, there was. We were gonna talk about it, existing current state planning docs, but we don't have time, so we need to table that. We don't have any public comment.
October.
And then on meeting evaluation, we won't do that, so we need a motion to adjourn.
I can do the meeting evaluation.
Want to do that?
It was great discussion. You gave great guidance,
I did.
educations, and the superintendent was well prepared.
That's really nice. I'll try to remember that. And motion to adjourn, just to make it official.
So moved.
Second.
Anybody opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions?